Good morning. You're listening to WVUD HD2 Newark, The Basement. This is our brief hour where we celebrate the poetry and prose that makes our brief hour on this earth a beautiful one. I'm Zach Davis, and I'm here with my mom, Lisa Davis. And today we're going to look at Shakespeare's Henry V. Henry V appears in three of Shakespeare's history plays, Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, where his father, Henry IV, is king, and Henry V, who's called Hal, is sort of a degenerate. He's hanging out with these low-class people and fooling around and getting drunk. And then the play Henry V, where Henry has exceeded the throne and wages a rather famous war on France, where he wins an underdog victory at the Battle of Agincourt. Henry was a historical king. He came to the throne in 1413, and he was one in a succession of three Henrys, Henry IV, Henry V, and Henry VI, who constituted the House of Lancaster. The House of Lancaster is one of two factions that will be fighting in the Wars of the Roses, which begin during Henry VI's reign. Henry IV started this little mini dynasty by usurping the throne from Richard II, the king previous to him. So all three Henrys have to cope with the fact that their rule might be illegitimate. There wasn't a legitimate succession going on here. Henry IV just kind of took over by force of arms. And you'll see and hear Henry V dealing with this as he becomes king.
Why did Shakespeare think they were so important? What sort of person was he representing Henry IV as? But more importantly, who did he think Henry V was?
In the big scheme of things, Henry V wasn't actually all that pivotal as an English king, because he only ruled for a few years, and all the gains he made were reversed by the poor rule of his son and successor, Henry VI. But the thing that Henry V offered to the English people was a victory against France. A famous victory. He was a huge underdog. Historians can't quite agree on the disparity in the number of soldiers between France and England in a famous fight that Henry V won, the Battle of Agincourt. But the French had a huge advantage, and through good leadership and luck and superior tactics, the English won. And so in many ways, the play Henry V and the lead up to it, as we see Hal mature in Henry IV, is about creating an English hero in a time where England was divided by religious wars between Catholics and Protestants. This is the after Henry VIII has famously broken from the Roman Catholic Church, and Protestants are in the ascendancy, even though Elizabeth herself isn't, who is reigning at the time Henry V is written, isn't willing to come out and call herself a Protestant. Protestantism is most certainly the direction in which England is going. So Shakespeare takes this king who, in the big scheme of things, was, a happy but inessential footnote, and makes him this transformative figure, this person who rose above and made himself into a hero. And we'll examine him to see Shakespeare's portrait of the making of a hero, and also Shakespeare's potentially almost subversive views of what it takes to be a good king, because Hal isn't your ordinary run-of-the-mill, everything is hunky-dory, we're all happy hero. He has to do a lot of fairly distasteful things. So we start off in the Boar's Head Tavern in Eastcheap, which is where Henry hangs out with his degenerate buddies. I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness. Yet Herein will I imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world, that, when he pleases again to be himself, being wanted, he may be more wondered at, by breaking through the foul and ugly mists of vapours that did seem to strangle him. If all the year were playing holidays, to sport would be as tedious as to work, but when they seldom come, they wished for come, and nothing pleaseth but rare accidents. So, when this loose behaviour I throw off, and pay the debt I never promised, by how much better than my word I am, by so much shall I falsify men's hopes, and like bright metal on a sullen ground, my reformation, glittering o'er my fault, shall show more goodly, and attract more eyes, than that which hath no foil to set it off. I'll so offend to make offence a skill, redeeming time when men think least I will. So we see here almost immediately a sort of Machiavellian side of Henry. And this is Machiavellian in the true sense, which is pragmatic rulership. Henry is saying that he'll behave like a jerk, behave like an entitled, loose, wanton child. So when he gets to the throne himself and starts acting mature, people will be even more impressed with him because he's made this incredible transformation than if he just behaved himself all along. And there's this sort of suggestion that he's in fact just stringing along these people he pretends to be friends with at the Boar's Head. And in fact, maybe he's just using them to enhance his poor reputation, which is a little bit of a concern to see him being so manipulative so young. But then later on in the Boar's Head, he's bragging to his friend Ned. With 3 or 4 loggerheads amongst 3 or 4 score hogsheads, I have sounded the very bass string of humility. Sirrah, I am sworn brother to a leash of drawers, and can call them all by their christened names, as Tom, Dick, and Francis. They take it already upon their salvation, that though I be but the Prince of Wales, yet I am king of courtesy, and tell me flatly I am no proud Jack, like Falstaff, but a Corinthian, a lad of mettle, a good boy by the Lord, so they call me, and when I am king of England, I shall command all the good lads in Eastcheap. They call drinking deep, dying scarlet, and when you breathe in your watering, they cry hem, and bid you play it off. To conclude, I am so good a proficient in 1/4 of an hour that I can drink with any tinker in his own language during my life. I tell thee, Ned, thou hast lost much honour that thou wert not with me in this sweet action. But, sweet Ned, to sweeten which name of Ned, I give thee this pennyworth of sugar, clapped even now into my hand by an underskinker, one that never spake other English in his life than 8 shillings and 6pence, and you are welcome with this shrill addition. Anon, sir, score a pint of bastard in the half-moon, or so. But, Ned, to drive away the time till Falstaff come, I prithee, do thou stand in some by-room while I question my puny drawer to what end he gave me this sugar, and do thou never leave calling Francis, that his tale to me may be nothing but anon! Step aside, and I'll show thee a precedent. So here Henry is telling his friend Ned and the audience that he's proud of the way that he can drink with the best of them. And we get this sense that he's in touch with the commons in a way that almost no English kings have been before. Although it's remarked in Shakespeare's play Richard II, where we see Hal's father, Henry IV, exceed the throne, that Henry IV also has a very good reputation with the common people. And this is what helps him overthrow Richard, who's seen as this sort of effete king who's just above it all. Hal is bragging that he can drink with the tinkers, and that people who talk about him when he's King of England, will be happy about him. They'll think he's one of them, in a way. He shall command all the good lads in Eastcheap because he's been hanging out with them this whole time. And again, in the light of what he said first off, about him pretending to be the sun, coming out from behind the clouds of this degeneracy, we have to wonder, is he doing this? Is he hanging out with his friends and playing pranks on them, which is what he's talking about with Ned at the end? He and Ned are going to try to harass this waiter. Like, Ned will be calling him, Francis, come here, Francis. And the waiter will be having to pay attention to Henry because, of course, everyone knows he's the Prince of Wales. So they'll just be kind of, freaking him out. Is Henry doing this because he's legitimately having fun? Or is he doing this because he knows that a reputation with the common people is only going to be good for him later on? You see him manipulating them just the same way that he's manipulating his buds like Ned and Falstaff, whom we're about to meet. So here we go with the first emotionally intense scene that Henry has with Falstaff, who's this old... he sort of defines degeneracy. Falstaff is this old knight who's fat and he loves drinking and he hangs out with everyone at Eastcheap and, he sleeps with prostitutes. But he's also sort of a father figure to Hal. He's much older than Hal is. And they have a very close seeming relationship. So Hal hears from a messenger while he's hanging out in the Boar's Head that his father has summoned him because there's the threat of this rebellion from people in the north, the Northumberlands, led by the Duke of Northumberland and his son, Henry Percy, called Hotspur, from whom we'll hear more later. So he and Falstaff have to plan this out, right? How Henry's going to deal with his father and make excuses for spending all his time in the Boar's Head. So they decide to roleplay, where Falstaff will be Henry IV and challenge Hal, and Hal has to defend himself. So here we go.
By the mass, lad, thou say'st true. It is like we shall have good trading that way. But tell me, Hal, art not thou horrible afeard, thou being heir apparent, could the world pick thee out 3 such enemies again as that fiend Douglas, that spirit Percy, and that devil Glendower? Art thou not horribly afraid? Doth not thy blood thrill at it?
Not a whit, faith. I lack some of thy instinct.
Well, thou wilt be horribly chid tomorrow when thou comest to thy father. If thou love me, practice an answer.
Do thou stand for my father, and examine me upon the particulars of my life?
Shall I? Content. This chair shall be my state, this dagger my sceptre, and this cushion my crown.
Thy state is taken for a joined stool, thy golden sceptre for a leaden dagger, and thy precious rich crown for a pitiful bald crown.
Well, and the fire of grace be not quite out of thee, now shalt thou be moved. Give me a cup of sack to make my eyes look red, that it may be thought I have wept, for I must speak in passion, and I will do it in King Cambus's vein.
Well, here is my leg.
And here is my speech. Stand aside, nobility. Harry, I do not only marvel where thou spend'st thy time, but also how thou art accompanied, for though the chamomile, the more it is trodden on, the faster it grows, yet youth, the more it is wasted, the sooner it wears. That thou art my son, I have partly thy mother's word, partly my own opinion, but chiefly a villainous trick of thine eye, and a foolish hanging of thy nether lip, that doth warrant me. If then thou be son to me, here lies the point. Why, being son to me, art thou so pointed at? Shall the blessed Son of Heaven prove a micker and eat blackberries? A question not to be asked. Shall the Son of England prove a thief and take purses? A question to be asked. There is a thing, Harry, which thou hast heard of, and it is known to many in our land by the name of pitch. This pitch, as ancient writers do report, doth defile. So doth the company thou keep'st, for, Harry, now I do not speak to thee in drink, but in tears, not in pleasure, but in passion, not in words only, but in woes also. And yet there is a virtuous man, whom I have oft noted in thy company, but I know not his name.
What manner of man, an it like your majesty?
A goodly portly man, in faith, and a corpulent, of a cheerful look, a pleasing eye, and a most noble carriage, and, as I think, his age some 50, or by a lady inclining to 60. And now I remember me, his name is Falstaff. If that man should be lewdly given, he deceiveth me. For, Harry, I see virtue in his looks. If then the tree may be known by the fruit, as the fruit by the tree, then peremptorily I speak it. There is virtue in that Falstaff. Keep him with, the rest banish. And tell me now, thou naughty varlet, tell me, where hast thou been this month?
Dost thou speak like a king? Do thou stand from me, and I'll play my father.
Depose me? If thou dost it half so gravely, so majestically, both in word and matter, hang me up by the heels for a rabbit-sucker or a poulter's hare.
Well, here I am set.
And here I stand, judge my masters.
Now, Harry, whence come you?
My noble lord, from Eastcheap.
The complaints I hear of thee are grievous.
Sblood, my lord, they are false. Nay, I'll tickle ye for a young prince, in faith.
Swear'st thou, ungracious boy? Henceforth ne'er look on me. Thou art violently carried away from grace. There is a devil hunts thee in the likeness of an old fat man. A ton of man is thy companion. Why dost thou converse with that trunk of humours, that bolting hutch of beastliness, that swollen parcel of dropsies, that huge bombard of sack, that stuffed cloak bag of guts, that roasted Manningtree ox with the pudding in his belly, that reverend vice, that grey iniquity, that father ruffian, that vanity in years? Wherein is he good but to taste sack and drink it? Wherein neat and cleanly but to carve a capon and eat it? Wherein cunning but in craft? Wherein crafty but in villainy? Wherein villainous but in all things? Wherein worthy but in nothing?
I would your grace would take me with you. Whom means your grace?
That villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, that old white-bearded Satan.
My lord, the man I know.
I know thou dost.
To say I know more harm in him than in myself were to say more than I know. That he is old, the more the pity his white hairs do witness it, but that he is, saving your reverence, a whoremaster, that I utterly deny. If sack and sugar be a fault, God help the wicked. If to be old and merry be a sin, then many an old host that I know is damned. If to be fat be to be hated, then Pharaoh's lean kine are to be loved. No, my good lord, banish Peto, banish Bardolph, banish Poins, but for sweet Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, true Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant, being, as he is, old Jack Falstaff, banish not him thy Harry's company. Banish not him thy Harry's company. Banish not him thy Harry's company. Banish plump Jack, and banish all the world.
I do. I will. This is a hilarious but also a bizarre scene. They start out having such a lot of fun, and they're both imitating King Henry, and they just bring down the house. Everyone around them is laughing. But when Prince Henry gets to criticizing Falstaff, he just goes on, and you have to wonder, is he really playing? Falstaff and he do this all the time. They trade insults all the time. But it seems like Harry kind of becomes a little more himself and a little less playful as he goes on and on about how awful Falstaff is. And you can see why Harry loves Falstaff. You can hear Falstaff joking around, and it's hilarious. His remark about, well, you are my son. Partly I have your mother's word for it, and partly I have my own opinion, but chiefly a villainous trick of thine eye. And at the end, as Falstaff gives this plea that you feel is really heartfelt, what does Harry mean when Falstaff says, "Banish not Jack," and Henry says, "I do, I will"?
And suppose it is that Henry is letting his friends know things are going to have to change.
Trying to break it to them gently.
Trying to push them away and say it can't stay the same. Which would be a hard thing to do to people you love.
Of course. And it's the choice of how to play that line. It's such a small, subtle thing, but it really determines a lot about Henry's character. Is he trying to be gentle and to let them down easily? Is he still playing? Or is this sort of a harsher thing he's saying? Is he trying to get at Falstaff after Falstaff gives this plea that feels really heartfelt? Banish Jack, banish all the world. And is Henry needling him like, I do banish Jack? Or is he saying, I do. It's how it has to be. And, spoiler alert, but at the very end of Henry IV Part 2, as Hal has exceeded and become King Henry, Jack bursts in on him during a royal procession and says, "Hal, I'm so happy for you, my boy." And we've heard him beforehand, when he hears Henry is king, saying like, "Yes, I'm going to get all sorts of awesome stuff. Henry's just going to take care of me. I'll be the most powerful king in the world." But he also seems genuinely happy. And you'll hear what Harry says to him in return. But it's a continuation of this sort of sad rejection of Falstaff and all that Henry has lived with, all the people Henry has made part of his life. But now we're switching gears. Henry V, Hal at this point, agrees with his father that he'll try to act a little more responsibly in this fight that Henry IV is waging against the rebels. And that's who Falstaff is talking about: Glendower, Percy, and Douglas. These are the main rebels, and Glendower is Welsh, and he's the one who kind of started this fighting in Wales, and the Percys picked it up to add their own grievances to it. And Hal has just dueled on the battlefield with Hotspur, the son of Henry Percy, Duke of Northumberland. And Hotspur is this sort of valiant, honorable man that everyone looks up to. And in fact, earlier in the play, Henry IV said, "I wish Hotspur was my son because he's so much more honorable and valiant than this, embarrassing kid that I have." So Hal has just killed Hotspur. And the audience knows this, but Hal doesn't. Falstaff is lurking behind a tree, listening to this fight, and pretending to be dead. So Hal says this to Percy, who may be dying or who may be already dead. "For worms, brave Percy, fare thee well, great heart. Ill-weaved ambition, how much art thou shrunk, when that this body did contain a spirit, a kingdom for it was too small a bound, but now 2 paces of the vilest earth is room enough. This earth that bears thee dead bears not alive so stout a gentleman. If thou wert sensible of courtesy, I should not make so dear a show of zeal. But let my favours hide thy mangled face, and even in thy behalf I'll thank myself for doing these fair rites of tenderness. Adieu, and take thy praise with thee to heaven. Thy ignominy sleep with thee in thy grave, but not remembered in thy epitaph. What, old acquaintance? Could not all this flesh keep in a little life? Poor Jack! Farewell. I could have better spared a better man. Oh, I should have a heavy miss of thee, if I were much in love with vanity. Death had not struck so fat a deer today, though many dearer in this bloody fray. Embowelled will I see thee by and by. Till then, in blood, by noble Percy lie.
Embowelled. If thou embowel me today, I'll give you leave to powder me and eat me tomorrow. Sblood, was time to counterfeit, or that hot termagant Scot had paid me Scot and lot too. Counterfeit? I lie. I am no counterfeit. To die is to be a counterfeit, for he is but the counterfeit of a man who hath not the life of a man, but to counterfeit dying, where a man thereby liveth, is to be no counterfeit, but the true and perfect image of life indeed. The better part of valour is discretion, in the which better part I have saved my life. Sounds. I am afraid of this gunpowder Percy, though he be dead. How, if he should counterfeit too and rise? By my faith, I am afraid he would prove the better counterfeit. Therefore I'll make him sure, yea, and I'll swear I killed him. Why may not he rise as well as I? Nothing confutes me but eyes, and nobody sees me. Therefore, sirrah, with a new wound in your thigh, come you along with me.
And there Falstaff stabs Percy's body to display that he has Percy's blood on his sword. He said that last thing to the audience after Hal had left. So Hal still doesn't know that Falstaff is alive. He re-enters. Hal re-enters. Art thou alive? Or is it fantasy that plays upon our eyesight? I prithee speak. We will not trust our eyes without our ears. Thou art now what thou seem'st.
No, that's certain. I am not a double man. But if I be not Jack Falstaff, then am I a Jack. There is Percy. If your father will do me an honour, so, if not, let him kill the next Percy himself. I look to be either Earl or Duke, I can assure you.
Why, Percy, I killed myself, and saw thee dead.
Didst thou? Lord, how this world is given to lying. I grant you I was down and out of breath, and so was he. But we rose both at an instant and fought a long hour by Shrewsbury clock, if I may be believed. So, if not, then let them that should reward valour bear the sin upon their own heads. I'll take it upon my death. I gave him this wound in the thigh. If the man were alive and would deny it, zounds, I would make him eat a piece of my sword.
Come, bring your luggage nobly on your back. For my part, if a lie may do thee grace, I'll gild it with the happiest terms I have. So, Falstaff utters this utter BS, like, I wasn't dead, Percy wasn't dead after you finished with him, so I finished him off in a duel for the ages. Just utterly ridiculous. And Hal, lets him get away with it. He says, I'll cover for you. If I can do you any good, I'll do it. And this is almost the very end of the play. Much later on, at the end of Henry IV, Part 2, The fight with Hotspur was at the end of Henry IV, Part 1. At the end of Henry IV, Part 2, Henry IV is very sick, lying in his deathbed, asleep and totally out of it. And Hal is sitting next to him, and they're all alone. Henry IV has insisted that his crown be put next to his head on the pillow. Why doth the crown lie there upon his pillow, being so troublesome a bedfellow? O polished perturbation, golden care, that keeps the ports of slumber open wide to many a watchful night. Sleep with it now, yet not so sound and half so deeply sweet as he whose brow with homely biggin bound snores out the watch of night. Oh, majesty! When thou dost pinch thy bearer, thou dost sit like a rich armor worn in heat of day that scalds with safety. By his gates of breath there lies a downy feather which stirs not. Did he suspire that light and weightless down perforce must move? My gracious lord, my father, this sleep is sound indeed. This is a sleep that from this golden wriggle hath divorced so many English kings. Thy due from me is tears and heavy sorrows of the blood, which nature, love, and filial tenderness shall, O dear father, pay thee plenteously. My due from thee is this imperial crown, which, as immediate as thy place and blood, derives itself to me. Lo, here it sits, which God shall guard, and put the world's whole strength into one giant arm. It shall not force this lineal honor from me. This from thee will I to mine leave, as 'tis left to me.
Warwick, Gloucester, Clarence, why did you leave me here alone, my lords? Where is the crown? Who took it from my pillow? The prince hath ta'en it hence. Go, seek him out. Is he so hasty that he doth suppose my sleep my death? Find him, my lord of Warwick, chide him hither. This part of his conjoins with my disease, and helps to end me. See, sons, what things you are, how quickly nature falls into revolt when gold becomes her object. For this the foolish, over-careful fathers have broke their sleep in thoughts, their brains with care, their bones with industry. For this they have engrossed and piled up the cankered heaps of strange achieved gold. For this they have been thoughtful to invest their sons with arts and martial exercises, when, like a bee, culling from every flower the virtuous sweets, our thighs packed with wax, our mouths with honey, we bring it to the hive, and like the bees are murdered for our pains. This bitter taste yield his engrossments to the ending father. Warwick re-enters. Now, where is he that will not stay so long, till his friend's sickness hath determined me?
Warwick, who's a younger son of the king, says, I found Hal in the next room, sobbing. He had the crown on his head, but he was so sad that you were dead, and here he comes.
But wherefore did he take away the crown? Lo, where he comes. Come hither to me, Harry. Depart the chamber. Leave us here alone.
I never thought to hear you speak again.
Thy wish was father, Harry, to that thought. I stay too long by thee, I weary thee. Dost thou so hunger for mine empty chair, that thou wilt needs invest thee with my honours before thy hour be ripe? O foolish youth, thou seek'st the greatness that will overwhelm thee. Stay but a little, for my cloud of dignity is held from falling with so weak a wind that it will quickly drop. My day is dim. thou hast stolen that which after some few hours were thine without offence, and at my death thou hast sealed up my expectation. Thy life did manifest thou lovedst me not, and thou wilt have me die assured of it. Thou hidest 1,000 daggers in thy thoughts, which thou hast whetted on thy stony heart, to stab at half an hour of my life. What? Canst thou not forbear me half an hour? Then get thee gone, and dig my grave thyself, and bid the merry bells ring to thine ear that thou art crowned, not that I am dead. Let all the tears that should bedew my hearse be drops of balm to sanctify thy head. Only compound me with forgotten dust. Give that which gave thee life unto the worms. Pluck down my officers, break my decrees, for now a time is come to mock at form. Harry the Fifth is crowned. Up, vanity! Down, royal state! All you sage counsellors, hence! And to the English court assemble now from every region apes of idleness. Now, neighbour confines, purge you of your scum. Have you a ruffian that will swear, dance, drink, revel the night, rob, murder, and commit the oldest sins, the newest kind of ways? Be happy. He will trouble you no more. England shall double gild his treble guilt. England shall give him office, honour, might. For the fifth Harry from curbed license plucks the muzzle of restraint, and the wild dog shall flesh his tooth on every innocent. Oh, my poor kingdom, sick with civil blows, when that my care could not withhold thy riots, what wilt thou do when riot is thy care? Oh, thou wilt be a wilderness again, peopled with wolves, thy old inhabitants.
Oh, pardon me, my liege! But for my tears, the moist impediments unto my speech, I had forestalled this dear and deep rebuke ere you with grief had spoke, and I had heard the course of it so far. There is your crown, and he that wears the crown immortally long guard it yours. If I affect it more than as your honour and as your renown, let me no more from this obedience rise, which my most inward, true, and duteous spirit teacheth. This prostrate and exterior bending, God witness with me, when I here came in, and found no course of breath within your majesty. How cold it struck my heart! If I do feign, oh, let me in my present wildness die, and never live to show the incredulous world the noble change that I have purposed. Coming to look on you, thinking you dead, and dead almost, my liege, to think you were, I spake unto this crown, as having sense, and thus upbraided it. The care on thee depending hath fed upon the body of my father. Therefore thou best of gold art, worst of gold. Other less fine and carat is more precious, preserving life and medicine potable, but thou most fine, most honoured, most renowned, hast eat thy bearer up. Thus, my most royal liege, accusing it, I put it on my head, to try with it, as with an enemy that had before my face murdered my father, the quarrel of a true inheritor. But if it did infect my blood with joy, or swell my thoughts to any strain of pride, if any rebel or vain spirit of mine did with the least affection of a welcome give entertainment to the might of it, let God for ever keep it from my head, and make me as the poorest vassal is that doth with awe and terror kneel to it.
Oh, my son, God put it in thy mind to take it hence, that thou mightst win the more thy father's love, pleading so wisely in excuse of it. Come hither, Harry, sit thou by my bed, and hear, I think, the very latest counsel that ever I shall breathe. God knows, my son, by what bypaths and indirect crooked ways I met this crown, and I myself know well how troublesome it sat upon my head. To thee it shall descend with bitter quiet, better opinion, better confirmation, for all the soil of the achievement goes with me into the earth. It seemed in me but an honour snatched with boisterous hand, and I had many living to upbraid my gain of it by their assistances, which daily grew to quarrel and to bloodshed, wounding supposed peace. All these bold fears thou seest with peril, I have answered, for all my reign hath been but as a scene acting that argument, and now my death changes the mode, and what in me was purchased falls upon thee in a more fairer sort. So thou the garland wearest successively. Yet, though thou standest more sure than I could do, thou art not firm enough, since griefs are green, and all my friends, which thou must make thy friends, have but their stings and teeth newly taken out, by whose fell working I was first advanced, and by whose power I well might lodge a fear to be again displaced, which to avoid I cut them off, and had a purpose now to lead out many to the Holy Land, lest rest and lying still might make them look too near unto my state. Therefore, my Harry, be it thy course to busy giddy minds with foreign quarrels, that action hence borne out may waste the memory of the former days. More would I, but my lungs are wasted soul, that strength of speech is utterly denied me. How I came by the crown, oh God forgive, and grant it may with thee in true peace live.
My gracious liege, you won it, wore it, kept it, gave it me, then plain and right must my possession be, which I with more than with a common pain 'gainst all the world will rightfully maintain. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Harry, as he's watching his father, thinking his father dead, very accurately repeats what his father has been saying all along, that this crown is giving him so much stress and so much worry. In fact, the famous line, "Heavy lies the head that wears the crown," which Henry IV says in Act 3, Hal almost repeats exactly. And we see here that for the first time, Hal really seems to understand what it means to rule, and to understand that it's going to be very difficult and going to require a whole lot of sacrifice on his part. And the advice that his father gives, go invade France, is telling, because what that does, what a foreign war does, is distract all the nobles who might otherwise get uppity and start fighting against you, the king. It bespeaks this incredible lack of trust in the relationship between the nobles and their king, which Henry says. He says, you have to win these guys over, who are my friends, but be aware that unless you act really cannily, they're not going to be your friends anymore. They're going to rise up against you, just like they did against Richard II to put me on the throne. And Hal takes these words to heart. In Henry V, he does invade France. But there's a level of not duplicity, but the need to be one step ahead of people who may well stab you in the back with little provocation, that seems to inform this possibly Machiavellian, manipulative, chilly world outlook that Hal might maintain. And that's the great question with Hal in these three plays. Is he chilly and manipulative, or is he genuine? Does he genuinely love his father? Does he genuinely react to this stress and hardship that the crown puts on him? Is he genuine in his famous speech to his soldiers in Henry V, the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, where he calls them brothers and exhorts them to fight with him for the glory of England? Is he being genuine, or is he saying exactly the things that he knows they need to hear and not believing a word of it? Or is he some combination? Some of his words here sound very emotional and sincere and not calculated. So the next scene comes in two parts. It's during the Henry V's coronation. Henry IV is now dead, and Hal becomes Henry V. He runs into the Lord Chief Justice, who's one of the people who had kind of chased Hal around when he was hanging out with his reprobate friends in Eastcheap. And the Lord Chief Justice is really worried because he thinks Hal's going to use his new position as king to get back at me, so I'm really in trouble. And then after that, Falstaff comes to make his plea to Henry as king. So this is Henry speaking to the Lord Chief Justice. "No, how might a prince of my great hopes forget so great indignities you laid upon me? What, rate, rebuke, and roughly send to prison the immediate heir of England? Was this easy? May this be washed in Lethe and forgotten?"
"You'd have done the same in my shoes. I was enforcing your father's law."
"You are right, Justice, and you weigh this well. Therefore still bear the balance and the sword, and I do wish your honors may increase till you do live to see a son of mine offend you and obey you as I did. So shall I live to speak my father's words. Happy am I that have a man so bold that dares do justice on my proper son, and not less happy having such a son that would deliver up his greatness so into the hands of justice. You did commit me, for which I do commit into your hand the unstained sword that you have used to bear, with this remembrance, that you use the same with the like bold, just and impartial spirit as you have done against me. There is my hand. You shall be as a father to my youth. My voice shall sound as you do prompt mine ear, and I will stoop and humble my intents to your well-practiced, wise discretions. And, princes all, believe me, I beseech you. My father is gone wild into his grave, for in his tomb lie my affections, and with his spirit sadly I survive to mock the expectation of the world, to frustrate prophecies, and to raise out rotten opinion, who hath writ me down after my seeming. The tide of blood in me hath proudly flowed in vanity till now. Now doth it turn and ebb back to the sea, where it shall mingle with the state of floods, and flow henceforth in formal majesty. Now call we our High Court of Parliament, and let us choose such limbs of noble counsel that the great body of our state may go in equal rank with the best governed nation, that war or peace or both at once may be as things acquainted and familiar to us, in which you, Father, shall have foremost hand. Our coronation done, we will excite, as I before remembered, all our state, and God, consigning to my good intents, no prince nor peer shall have just cause to say, God shorten Harry's happy life one day. So there's this fascinating moment where Harry calls the Lord Chief Justice, who's hounded him for 2 plays, father. And of course, Falstaff has been sort of this father figure to Harry, as Harry's been very distant from Henry IV until the very end of this play. He calls the Lord Chief Justice father and begs him to continue to hound Henry V's actions to make sure he stays honorable and just and within the law. And so now Falstaff approaches.
God save thy grace, King Hal, my royal Hal. God save thee, my sweet boy.
My Lord Chief Justice, speak to that vain man.
Have you your wits? Know you what 'tis to speak? My king, my Jove, I speak to thee, my heart.
I know thee not, old man. Fall to thy prayers. How ill white hairs become a fool and jester. I have long dreamed of such a kind of men, so surfeit-swelled, so old and so profane. But being awaked, I do despise my dream. Make less thy body hence, and more thy grace. Leave gormandizing. Know the grave doth gape for thee thrice wider than for other men. Reply not to me with a fool-born jest. Presume not that I am the thing I was, for God doth know, so shall the world perceive, that I have turned away my former self, so will I those that kept me company. When thou dost hear, I am as I have been, approach me, and thou shalt be as thou wast, the tutor and the feeder of my riots. Till then I banish thee, on pain of death, as I have done the rest of my misleaders, not to come near our person by 10 mile. For competence of life I will allow you that lack of means enforce you not to evil. And as we hear you do reform yourselves, we will, according to your strengths and qualities, give you advancement. Be it in your charge, my lord, to see performed the tenor of our word. Set on. This fascinating moment where Henry completely rebukes Falstaff. And you hear in him, he kind of slips and makes an old joke. He says, the grave gapes 3 times as wide for you than it does for other men. And Falstaff thinks he's joking because Falstaff is so fat. But Harry says immediately, presume not that I am the thing I was. Reply not to me with a fool-born jest. I'm not joking anymore, Falstaff. But he does provide for Falstaff. He gives Falstaff a sort of pension and says, you can come back if ever you reform, although he knows that Falstaff is never going to reform. You know, Falstaff is a dyed-in-the-wool jokester and reprobate and petty criminal. And that's it. Falstaff is gone. And in fact, immediately after this scene, Henry sends policemen to go arrest everyone from the Boar's Head. They've done no crimes, but he arrests them all. The landlady, Poins, Bardolph, Ancient Pistol, everyone who he's hung out with, on no charge at all, he has them arrested. Because that's what he needs to do to maintain his honor and his status and his public perception as a reformed king. But man, what a tearing emotional scene. The poor Falstaff is just, he's saying, my sweet boy, my lovely Harry. And Harry gives him the cold shoulder.
He puts in question how affiliated Harry really is with the common man.
Was he only ever doing it to look like he was affiliated with the common man? So now we jump to Henry V, the play Henry V, where Henry is mulling over this invasion of France. But interestingly enough, the play starts, the very first scene is a conversation between 2 high church officials who are saying, Henry's thinking over some law that's going to take a lot of money away from us, away from the church. So let's distract him by encouraging him to invade France. Because they know as well as everyone that a foreign war distracts all the politicians. So everything that follows is framed by this duplicitous scene. And you have to wonder, is Henry being manipulated here? Is he just doing what the church wants? Like, is he still kind of that youthful, hot-headed kid he was, who's like, honor, glory, let's have a war, I'm going to go for it? Or is he acting sensibly, as his father suggested him to do? Or both? That's all the time we have this week. Next week, we're going to look at what Harry becomes in in the next play, Henry V, when he's settled on his throne. And we'll see how his experiences to date shape his rule. For now, thanks very much to my mom, Lisa, for playing the parts of Falstaff and everyone else in Harry's life. Next time, look for both of us as we play Henry V, including the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." So you've been listening to Our Brief Hour on WVUD HD2, Newark, The Basement. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week at 7 a.m. sharp, Friday morning. Till then, take care.
Thanks, Zach, and see you guys next week.